The Drug Delusion. Government exists to protect us from each other. Where government has gone beyond its limits is in deciding to protect us from ourselves. Ronald Reagan. What do we mean by drugs? The word drug is a very broad term and can refer to anything from aspirin to heroin. In its common usage, drugs are intoxicants or substances that induce a certain temporary mental state. People sometimes forget that coffee, alcohol and tobacco are all intoxicating, mind-altering substances. Drugs in popular usage. Caffeine is one of the most popular intoxicants to date and was almost banned in America along with cocaine. Alcohol and tobacco are also highly popular and both have very negative side effects from continued use, including liver failure, cancer and emphysema. Popular illegal drugs include cannabis, cocaine, heroin, gamma-hydroxybutyrate, ecstasy, ketamine, shrooms, LSD, morphines, amphetamine, methamphetamines, benzodiazepines, and many others. These drugs have effects varying from stimulants to hallucinogens to narcotics. All drugs, even paracetamol, can be harmful, especially taken over a long period of time or in high dosages. Reliable clinical information is restricted, but in recent times more and more research has been put into the effects of drugs upon the human person. Heroin, diacetylmorphine, is a powerful painkiller, both physically and mentally, leaving users feeling secure, comfortable and happy. It, like other opiates, morphine, codeine, hydrocodone, oxycodone, and opiates, phenyl, methadone, etc., can cause physical addiction. Cocaine, amphetamines, methamphetamines, and stimulants are given to users. Drugs that give users a feeling of great energy and confidence. D-lysergic acid diethylene, or LSD, dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, and psilocybin mushrooms, also known as shrooms, are hallucinogens, which can cause vivid hallucinations of high plasticity. There are many other types of drugs with varying effects. In March 2007, the House of Commons Committee on Science and Technology produced a report on the harm, mentally, physically and otherwise, that 20 of the most popular recreational drugs cause. It concluded that, unsurprisingly, heroin and cocaine were most damaging, but that, out of those 20, alcohol was the 5th most damaging, and tobacco the 9th. Cannabis came into 11th, even with the new super skunk varieties, generally thought to be 2 to 3 times higher in THC levels than in the 60s, were taken into account. LSD came 14th and ecstasy came 18th, 2 from the bottom. Psilocybin mushrooms were not ranked on the report, but no overdose-related deaths have ever been recorded, and the only psilocybin-related deaths are caused by foolish actions under the influence of the hallucinations, rather than by the drug itself. That's people doing stupid things whilst high, a completely preventable thing, and something that we currently prosecute under intoxicated and disorderly, drunken disorderly, and can continue to do that if these such things were legalised. The main question for me is the harm they cause relevant? And no, it's not, because it's harm that they only cause upon the person. I believe that as citizens of a liberal democracy, each individual should have the right to act as they wish, so long as it does not infringe upon the rights of others unduly. Drug use is an entirely personal thing. Acts under the influence of a drug can be prosecuted in exactly the same manner as those under the influence of alcohol can be at the moment. Otherwise, drug use is a personal thing, and no business of the state to interfere. A lot of people ask me, won't drug use increase if they are legalised? I have to say that use of currently illegal drugs will probably increase, but by how much it is unsure to say. But it is likely to even out as drinking goes down. People often only wish to achieve a state of intoxication, and currently the only legal means to do this is drink, something which causes far more social damage than ecstasy. Ecstasy is more likely to make people feel loved up and relaxed, whereas drink is more likely to make people feel aggressive and angry. How did we get where we are today? Here's some of the history. Until the early 20th century, all drugs were legal for sale or possession within the UK. There's a picture of a man smoking an opium pipe. Cocaine was sold in wines and in tinctures and over-the-counter syringe kits set up for injection, as well as morphine, which was also sold in these kind of things, and diacetylmorphine by the end of the 19th century. There's a picture of a cough remedy which contains mullein. Mullein was the wine that was made of a combination of cocaine and alcohol. Few people knew or guessed the true dangers and side effects of the drugs, but it became apparent they were powerfully addictive. The main thing to remember is that there was no proper scientific evidence as taken to the harms of these drugs, and people got into it without knowing what they were getting into, and there was a large public backlash against them. There is an American, something made by the American Eye Salve Company, which contained cocaine. Because so little was known about the effects of these drugs, people could not make informed decisions about whether or not to take them, leading to an epidemic. In the midst of the temperance movement, they seemed a better concession than mainstream intoxicants such as alcohol or tobacco. One other theory proposed is that it's quite a racist thing, that cannabis was taken away because it hurt the Mexicans, that cocaine was taken away because it hurt the blacks, and that opium was taken away because it hurt the Chinese. All of whom were usurping, or seemed to be usurping, the jobs of white men. What other benefits would legalization bring? Interestingly, the irony of our current situation is that we are financing terrorism. 90% of the world's heroin comes from Afghanistan, where large profits go to Al-Qaeda. Drug money, especially ecstasy, has long been a source of money for nationalist gangs in Eastern Europe. Even dictators such as Saddam Hussein took a cut of the drug running through the south of Iraq. America annually spends $69 billion to fight the war on drugs, which is a bit of a misnomer. Drugs are absolutely massacring them. Drug use is still on the increase, and that to me suggests that money could be better spent. Without prohibition, drug use could be regulated, and we can make money out of the drug use. At the moment, it's simply a giant cost to society. There is even a large pressure group called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, otherwise known as LEAP, which is composed of ex-police officers or current police officers who oppose the situation based on their first-hand experience with it. One of them suggested that what he didn't like was that busting one dealer meant a gang war followed by 2 years later another dealer. If drugs were produced legally with industrial techniques and set purity standards, we would provide taxation, employment, regulation and lower prices. All of those are important, and people tend to, when I say lower prices, people tend to think, oh, but surely that's just making the drugs easier for addicts to get hold of. And yes, that is. And the reason we want to make it easier for them to get hold of is so that they don't have to steal and cost the UK society $40,000 per head of heroin user in theft alone. When we could, it's been assessed that a cost to society of £12,500 a head, we could just give it to them rather than the $40,000 they're currently doing. If it was heroin was legal, to get enough for a day of hit would cost the same as a pack of 20. And how many people do you see stealing to pay for their nicotine addiction? I would suggest very few. The government would get money rather than criminal gangs. Over $100 billion a year leaves the US economy into criminal hands, added to the $69 billion fighting it. Think of the tax cuts for Americans. I know in the UK we see very few tax cuts, but it could go elsewhere, such as the NHS and perhaps other parts of the police service, so we could cut down on murders and theft. Incidentally, a murderer is going to get less time than the drug dealer in prison at the moment. Is legalisation the perfect solution? No solution is ever perfect. As with anything in politics, what you give to the right hand, you take from the left. However, I do think it is a better solution to the one we've got at the moment. Whilst we could say that there is going to be an increase in use, and I don't doubt that there is going to be an increase in use, that increase in use is not necessarily going to be problematic. It's certainly going to be far less problematic than the current increase in use, even though it is illegal. What is important to remember is that currently addicts are a far worse problem than they need to be. They need to steal to feed their habits, they can't get employment. These problems can be massively reduced or can go away entirely under legalisation. And I suppose one of the historical arguments, and the one that LEAP often proposes, is prohibition wasn't the answer for alcohol, so why is it going to work for drugs? We are just legislating private morality. It's almost as ridiculous as legislating against onanism.